Good evening, welcome to the AgriLeader Labour Life Cycle webinar series. We're now on developing people, and I've got a few housekeeping notes to start with, so just bear with me while we whistle through those. Attendees are going to be muted. We're going to start now. We should be about an hour, might be a bit shorter, we'll see how we go. The webinar is going to be recorded, so we'll post it up onto the AHDB website and YouTube channels afterwards. And if a survey pops up at the end, please do complete it. It helps us make them better in future. Now then, if you want to ask a question, I've got my colleague Isaac in the background, so he can get those through to us. On your sort of control panel, there's a little side, grey side box, and at the top of there should be an orange arrow. If you click on that arrow, it opens up another box, and in there there says questions and a little white down arrow. So if you tap on the question, it means you can type in a question and we can get it and hopefully answer it for you towards the end of the session. So let me do an introduction for us all. As a farming community, we might be world class at growing seed, stock and crops, but how well do we nurture our people? If your people are supported, skilled, confident, they're more likely to stay with you, be happier, more productive, and less likely to have accidents. We know the theory, but like everything, putting it into practice is harder, which is why AHDB recently launched the Labour Life Cycle pages, and that's a library of online information and resources to help farmers better manage their people. So I'm going to be talking with Kim Stafford, Director of U&I. Kim has been working as a management coach, trainer and facilitator for 20 years. She specialises in service quality management, management development and coaching. And Kim has also helped us actually build some of the resources in the labour life cycle. So a great person to have on with us, knows it all inside out. We're also joined by Nicola Carr. Nicola manages the team in logistics at Bomber County Produce, who are suppliers of leeks and asparagus to major UK supermarkets, and they also grow wheat, barley, oilseed rape and sugar beet. So busy place. Both Kim and I have been there. And Nicola was also one of our case study farmers when we very first set up the labour life cycle. So welcome to you both, and a huge thank you for joining us. So we wanted to kick off by actually, if we can, running a poll to find out, or to sort of ask the question, is developing people actually worth it? We know farmers are busy, they've got a massive to-do list. So we have got a quick poll to run, and Maya, who's our technical wizard in the background, is hopefully going to pop up the poll on screen. There you go. Gosh, that was quick. Thank you, Maya. So there you go, you can see it there. Why is it important to you to develop your people? There are 5 answers there. I think you can actually choose more than one, so please tick away to your heart's content, and then we'll get some results in. We'll give you a few seconds to get that done, and then Kim is going to pick it up and we're just going to talk through that question really. Hopefully people are ticking some boxes. If not, Kim, you can take it away.
Sometimes it takes a few minutes for it to people to read it and fill it in. So
that's very true. Yeah, very true. So Maya might give us a. There you go. So we've got some results there. So we've got 40% on fewer workplace accidents, 100% on increasing staff retention. So everybody, that's a good idea. We've got 80% on improved productivity, 100% on preventing unnecessary mistakes, and 40% saving time and money. So Kim, do you want to talk through some of that for us?
Yeah, thank you for doing that. It's always interesting when you look at the response to that. It's always interesting that people do talk about developing people has been important, And some of the sort of feedback we've had doing the case studies is it's important, but sometimes it's hard to find the time to get it when you're really busy. Now, that feedback is interesting because that's sort of saying that there were real benefits from developing people. You know, it's even just looking at that staff retention being up at 100%. So, if you know, the reality is that a lot of people now, when they go to work for an employer, and we've talked quite a lot on the Labour Life Cycle site about employer of choice, being invested in, it's not just about what people are paid, it's also the other benefits they get from working for farm businesses. And what often attracts people now is actually being developed. That's becoming a lot higher up the list of on that employer of choice, what attracts people to work on your farm. So that's really interesting, that one's come out. And also, you know, just the reality of, you know, preventing unnecessary mistakes. There is a bit of a link between that and saving time and money at the bottom of the poll, because, you know, sometimes we don't always find the time to train and develop people, but we're having to find the time to pick up maybe the mistakes that are happening as a result of not doing that. So I always say, well, it's not that you've not got the time, it's just your time's probably going in the wrong place. So the fact that you know, there's a lot of people saying unnecessary mistakes, yeah, those could be prevented if time was invested in developing people and helping them understand, you know, what's expected of them and what doing a good job looks like. So the results of the poll, a really nice summary is there are tangible benefits from developing people. And most of the farmers we've talked to, particularly in working through the Labour Life Cycle case studies, see those benefits. You know, when they have trained and developed people, they see the results of that. And there's something in it for you as a manager as well, because that saving time and money means that if you've got people that are growing and developing, then there's less pressure on you to be chasing around, putting things right that are going wrong. And also your business is more likely to grow because there's less dependency on you too. Really interesting feedback, Ken. Really interesting. Useful starting point.
It certainly is.
We can build on that, can't we? Just looking at
absolutely.
Let's look at how you can do it.
Now, something that you know, we've come across with the case studies is, you know, on farm you can get a huge range of different characters, different outlooks, different sort of stages in people's careers, and how can farmers go about trying to almost like, you know, get through to all those different people, different personalities, different stages in career, everything. It's just like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. So what's your advice for that?
I think might be useful to put our sort of the slide up that actually made us smile when we were looking at and talking about the fact that just acknowledging that people are different. And you're going to have, you know, different characters, you're going to have different people working for you. I think even just appreciating people are different. I have to say, a couple of pieces of work I've done this week, I think I've met most of these people on my travels since Monday. But just acknowledging, if at least you acknowledge people are different and not you. Because I think when you're developing people, what you want to make sure is that if you're investing in developing people, it's paying back. And just if you maybe just are developing people in the way that's worked for you, it might be that they're different. So just acknowledging they're different. And actually, what I think was an interesting one for me, I've got a client that's got a bit of a strapline that says sort of leadership is a contact sport. And what they were pretty much saying was that unless you have contact with your people, you can't lead and develop them. And if you don't know your people and you don't know what makes them tick, then sometimes it's really difficult to sort of develop them in a way that's going to pay off and get it right for them. So it's just acknowledging that if you understand what makes people tick, what works for them and what doesn't, then there's more chance that if you do invest in developing them, you'll get results from that.
Yeah. Shall I move on a slide?
Yeah, because let's connect it to the Labour Life Cycle, because because I know we're going to bring Nicola in, who's got some real sort of bring it to life examples for us. But this is a little snapshot of one of the tools that, for example, is on the labour life cycle. And it's just almost a mini version of something that we've used. And what it's doing, it's just almost giving you some clues about how people are different. What I'd quite like you to do, if you're happy to play with us and have a go, is have a read of what's on there. So if you look at the statement on the left-hand side that says, before using a new phone that I'm not familiar with, you might either read the handbook, talk to somebody who's got a similar sort of phone, or jump in and just have a go and practice and learn. If you read across those examples, pick out whether you're more likely to be the column that's got V above it, the column that's got A above it, or the column that's got K above it. And I know you might be a mix, but I'm going to force you to almost choose one of those columns that's most like you. And if you can choose one of those columns, would you stick in the chat box a letter, either a V, an A, or a K? Because it's just interesting to see the mix that we've got on this call. So just take a minute to have a read of it, and then just put one letter in that chat box and send it through, either a V if you most like the V column, an A if you most like the A column, or a K.
We've got a K.
Okay.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
I think I'm a V. What are you, Nicola?
Probably an A.
Yeah. Okay.
Like an A. Oh, that's interesting. We've got some V's coming in. We've got some K's coming in.
I don't know. It could also be a V at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of a mix.
It depends what I'm doing. I do like a checklist.
Thank you. We've got a few examples coming in, and actually, even within this audience, we've got a mix of the different styles. And you're likely to be a bit of a blend. I know often you're not likely to be just sort of straight down the line. But the idea behind this tool is that it actually is intended to start a conversation. So if we're trying to find out how people maybe learn or take in information, this is one way that you can get some sort of clues about what that might be, without maybe, and I know we've laughed about this in some of the case study meetings we've had, and I know with Nicola, you don't really want to sit down with one of your staff and say, right, can you tell me how you learn, please? That would be really useful, because people don't always know where to start, or they don't even know how they learn, they just do it. Whereas this is an example of a tool that is on the labour life cycle, where it just opens a conversation and it gives you some ideas about how people might take in information. And if you just put I suppose the next slide up, Kay, just as a bit of a summary of how that might be different. You know, if you are visual, so if you're mainly that first column, if you're quite visual, then sometimes you learn best when you can actually see things. You know, it might be that you need to look at the information written down. It might be that, you know, you need to see instructions on a WhatsApp message, and that will almost register better with you and you remember it better. If you're auditory, you might want to talk things through, and that might help learning stick. It might help you remember things. And the kinesthetic one is about, you know, you might want to just do it, have a go, get your hands dirty. And the reality is if you've got a bit of a feel for how people take in information and how they learn, it might give you some clues about how to sort of press the buttons to help them, and it almost learning is more likely to stick. So for example, if you've spent lots of time explaining instructions to somebody, and that's quite an auditory way of helping them learn, but they're more visual. You might talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes, then they go away and they've forgotten it. And then you get frustrated because you're having to tell them again. Whereas if you work out they're a bit more visual, it might be that, you know, explain things, but you give them that information either on a laminated sheet or in a WhatsApp. And if you've just tweaked how you're helping them learn, and it's going to work better for them, then that learning is more likely to stick. And fortunately, we've got Nicola on our call today, who actually has used this tool, a couple of versions of this, in reality, so we can actually sort of listen to Nicola's experience of how that helped with real people.
Yeah, it was really good for me. We have 2 employees that are direct employees, different ages. And for me, one of our new employees, he's young, and we were struggling with his training. He wasn't retaining information. So we tried a number of different ways. And obviously, as part of this labour life cycle, we used the VAT questionnaire and worked through that with him and discovered actually the best way for us to work with him on his training was to be visual with him, to record videos and so that he could save them on his phone and play back, and use a WhatsApp group. So anything to go into there and to keep things short. So we weren't having to repeat everything, so he wasn't having to call all the time to ask for information over and again. And yeah, it worked really well. Our older employee, visual learning, came out from that. So lists, checklists, making sure everything was written down. So it was a very interesting thing to undertake, a valuable, really valuable tool.
And actually, just even having, I suppose, because me and Kay sort of worked with Nicola and actually went on her farm, which is just great to see the results of that. But what I really loved about how Nicola dipped into these tools is you don't have to use them as a, you know, that could be a tick list, but it also could just be have a chat around, you know, let's have a chat around some of these examples that are on this bit of paper. The best way of thinking about the toolkit is you can adapt it and tweak it to work for, you know, your people. It doesn't have to be you have to follow set rules in how some of the tools are used. And Nicola really brought it to life for us. You know, we really saw how it almost meant that the conversation just became easier, because as opposed to that person talking about themselves, they were looking at examples on a bit of a tick list sheet, and it's a bit less personal then.
Yeah, I found also, because a bit like the questionnaire earlier, my younger employee actually was a mix between the two. We didn't get a definitive answer out of the VAT questionnaire. So then that opened up a whole extra conversation about, okay, well, in that case, let's look at some other techniques. And we worked together to find out actually the best way for him to learn and retain. So, and also it just opened up that conversation, and just taking 5 minutes in the field or 5 minutes in the yard just to have a chat and just to talk to him about how his learning is going, how is it, you know, how's your day going, you know, picking up any little bits of information has really helped with his training.
And if you loop that back to what Kim was saying earlier, I know that employee, you were saying that he'd been spending a lot of time phoning up, you know, more senior employees in the farm. I just need to check, do I do it like this? Do I do it like that? So the phone calls that have been negated now because you found a way for him to retain that information. So it is saving time. Yeah. And he's more confident.
Yeah. I hope so. I think so. Yeah. You know, you're going to gain confidence when you know you're doing something right and you're not having to ask the same question over and over again to a colleague, because you feel, you know, like you're doing something wrong if you're having to repeat the question over and over again. But if you can just look at a video on your phone because your colleague has shown you how to do it and you videoed it, you know, it takes that out of the cycle.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, Kim, we were going to talk a little bit more about how training can development can sometimes be seen as just traditionally training, and that's not the case. We know that there's a whole raft of ways that can be done, don't we?
Yeah, and I actually think that's how, in a way, the labour life cycle almost plays to that, because I think sometimes people have got a view that development is training and it's taking people away from their jobs and it's costing quite a lot of money. Whereas these are almost just some examples of what development could be. And it's just casting that net a little bit wider and thinking about the sorts of things that would give people an opportunity to learn. And the list goes on. You know, whether you're looking at, you know, training is in there, and that's important if people, you know, need to learn specific skills that are not within the business. But there are just so many other options these days that for me are development opportunities. So, you know, we've put the range up there, and actually, I suppose what is interesting is you know, some technology now comes into being, so there's a bit more e-learning, or, you know, webinar, this type of thing, sort of webinars. And I know Nicola's got examples of, you know, how some of this type of learnings work better for some of her staff than others. But just a quick link to things like using things that you maybe already do on farm as a development opportunity. So if you already run meetings, for example, we've got that up there as development. If you already run meetings, then there's an opportunity when you've got your people together in those meetings to do some learning. So it's almost look at things that you may be already doing and see whether you can use them to get more out of you know, the meeting's going to happen anyway. Could there be some learning built into that? Maybe you could ask people to come in and talk about, you know, what's been going on their part of the farm and give a little bit of an update. And that might actually build their confidence and give them the opportunity to maybe sort of think about how they communicate with their colleagues. So it's just maybe looking at what you already do to start off with and seeing whether you can just tweak it into becoming a learning opportunity, even getting people to run part of a meeting, you know, so that they maybe, you know, need to become more experienced at running meetings. You might not almost like parachute them into a meeting and say, get on with it, but you could actually build up their confidence over time and let them run a little bit of a meeting. So it's just looking at where those development opportunities are, and problem solving is down there as well. Maybe getting almost like getting teams together, or giving an individual responsibility for solving a problem or coming up with a new idea of doing something differently.
Yeah, it's easy to jump in, isn't it? And fix problems when actually, you know the answer, but just because you know the answer, if you could just hold back and let somebody work it out for the first time, that is an absolute, little gem, isn't it?
It is. And Nicola, you gave us some great examples of how you've got different people on farm who almost respond to different sorts of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, with the age gaps, and I think a lot of farms will find this with younger workers and older, you know, their methods of learning are completely different. So some will prefer to be online and some will prefer to be in front of a tutor. You know, and we found that in the confidence in employees as well. You know, some people are confident with their learning, you know, and they're willing to tackle new courses, learning to go away and do a 2-day course. Whereas you've got some that actually don't have the confidence, that don't want to undertake any professional development, you know, that would much sooner just stay in the role they're doing. But at the same time, you know, we have to develop them, you know, they have to gain skills. So it's trying to find the right training for them. And sometimes that is just an online course or sitting down with them and going through something with them. Even if it's just, you know, like you say, that 5-minute meeting, or just saying, hey, you know, you're doing a great job. Do you think you could do this as well? I'll show you how it's done. And then let them take on a new role. It just, you know, it's about listening to your employees and, you know, working with them to understand their best methods, how they learn, and then finding the training that suits them best. And it doesn't have to be a 2-day course. It could just be a 10-minute chat. You know, time with farmers is tight. It's always tight. You know, we're always struggling to fit that course in, get somebody off farm, you know, for a few hours even. So, you know, there are so many different opportunities for training out there, and I just don't think we maybe utilise them all.
Okay, so we've had a look at why development's important. We've looked a bit about how people take on learning in different ways, the different like delivery options that there are. On the labour life cycle, we've got a lot of what we've been chatting about is also summaried, and there's some tips, some guidance, some advice, some of the tooling that we've talked about. So please do go and have a dip in there. There is some on the there as well about coaching, and coaching something that came up quite a lot when we did the case studies, because it's so flexible, it's so malleable, it can be done on farm, and so we thought we'd just have a bit more of a chat about the coaching as well, and particularly about how you can deliver that, Kim.
Yeah, I think in a way, I think coaching is one of the big opportunities for farmers, because it's about it not getting in the way of the business running. So I see coaching as just a way of having conversations with people throughout the day, and it's you know, if you think about coaching as just helping people think. So if you can get people thinking about what they're doing and get those light bulbs switched on, then there's more chance they will learn. It's just when people get into autopilot and they're not really taking anything in. And coaching's a great way of just getting people to think. And it's mainly about asking questions, but it's not asking questions to get answers. It's asking questions to get people to think about what they're doing. So where you've got opportunities, if I give you a couple of examples here, you might have a coaching opportunity when you've explained a job to somebody before they go away and even do it. You could either say, make sure you get that right, or you could say to them, okay, so just talk me through what exactly you're going to go away and do so I can make sure that I've explained that correctly. And just by asking that question and listening to how they say it back to you, gives you some clues about where their level of understanding is, but it also means they're thinking about what they're going away to do. You could also ask questions, for example, as you're walking around farm. So, you know, rather than a question of just how's it going, it might be that as you're walking past somebody on farm, you ask what I call a coaching question, which might be, you know, how's this morning gone? What have you managed to achieve so far against the plan that you had, you know, when we set off first thing? So what have you done so far? What's outstanding? And it's giving you a little bit more feedback, but also it's getting them to think about what they're doing, you know, whether they're behind on jobs or whether they're going to run out of time. And finally, you can also coach after somebody's completed a job. And it just might be, rather than people completing a job and then just shutting down and then the next day doing it in exactly the same way, it could be that after somebody's completed a job, you just do a review with them. How's that gone? You know, what's gone well today? You know, what might we need to change if we're going to do that tomorrow? So the coaching questions are, for me, are coaching conversations that you can have just as you're doing the job on farm. It's not taking people off the job. It's not taking a lot of extra time. If you're going to have contact and conversations with your staff anyway, then just think about the types of conversations that are not going to just give you useful feedback about what people are understanding or where they are, but it also gets them to start thinking. And I think sometimes what I think people underestimate, and we've seen this with all the case study farms, is a lot of the farmers, we'll talk about some of the other examples in a sec, they're probably doing coaching already, but it's only when you make them aware that it's coaching that they realise it's quite a powerful way to have a chat, but have a chat that's actually got a purpose and adds some value and helps people learn and gives them some feedback. So just almost maybe tweaking some of the questions that you're asking. And I'm thinking about, I suppose I'm thinking about at the dairy farm, Katie and Anna.
When they went away on holiday.
Before we go to Italy. And they went away on holiday, and when they came back, they just pretty much asked the guy that they'd left in charge, you know, so they would have just come back and said, oh, are you okay? You know, it's been fine. And instead, they did a coaching review with him. And they asked him more specific questions around, you know, okay, how's it gone? Which is great as a starter. But what bits have gone well? You know, which bits have you found most challenging? What's taken up most of your time? And by asking some more coaching questions, they actually learned that the way he was feeding the calves wasn't necessarily the most efficient way. And if they hadn't have had that conversation, and it wasn't asking him questions to get an answer, you know, actually we want to check out whether you've got it right. It was asking questions in the tone that almost he's saying, I'm interested. Tell me about, you know, what's been happening while we've been away. They learn a huge amount about, you know, how seen the job, the bits that he enjoyed, the bits that he's struggled with, and that's really set them off on the route of where he needs to do a bit more development. But it's given them some clues about the fact that if they're not asking enough questions, they're sometimes assuming or hoping people have learned or understood, and they realise that just making that assumption is, well, why do it? Why assume if you can ask some good coaching questions and actually find out? And so that was a really good example. And I know Nicola's had some great conversations with some of your staff, Nicola. You actually almost just took that time out to have that chat.
Yeah, actually, it's really opened up conversations with my team, actually taking time out to go and talk to them, to understand what motivates them, and to talk about their day. And, you know, things have been pulled out of that. So we've made improvements. We've realised that communication could be improved, and worked out how we were going to better do that. You know, with our older employee, about her confidence, and, you know, how to engage better and support her. So just that chatting, you know, talking things through, instead of just, you know, going through the routine of day to day, every day. It really does help.
That's good to hear. And on the labour life cycle, just to sort of, I suppose, bring in the coaching example, it's that on the labour life, there are sort of tips around the types of questions you might want to consider asking, before somebody does a job while you're walking around, or after they've done it. So they're almost examples that you can actually tap into on the website, just to sort of give you that flavour of what coaching looks like and sounds like.
And they've been written, it's been created very much with, you know, farmers in mind as well, hasn't it? So it's not sort of too HR orientated, it's much more farming orientated. So that was designed obviously on purpose. So I think the thing that we should just pick up and say is that, you know, we probably said it already, but it doesn't have to be perfect right from the get-go. And, you know, it's just about making a start, and it being work in progress. I think Nicola would agree with that, you know, it doesn't always go swimming to start with, but just the fact that you made a start, and then things start to flow a bit more. But it's just getting you sort of that first step, a small step. And I think that, and with the labour life cycle, we've created it very much with the thought in mind that, you know, if there's just one thing on there, sometimes it can be a small thing that makes a huge change, and we're not expecting people to wade through it all. But if there's just one little nugget in there that you come across that works, you think, oh, okay, and then other things flow from it. So
just picking up on that, I was just thinking about a couple of the case studies in what you've just said there, Kay, where when we worked with Emma on the beef farm, that she really just wanted a way of reviewing, you know, and getting people to sort of learn and improve. And one of the tools that we used in that case study was a 4-box review framework, you know, the typical, and the coaching questions, you know, what's gone well, what could have gone better, what do we need to do differently next time, and how we're going to make that happen. And that was almost a little 4-box framework, which is in the toolkit. And what was great was, for Emma, she wanted a really simple way of introducing reviewing as a way of the business working. So that 4-boxer became a way of reviewing the business. It became a way of reviewing their systems and their processes. And she's now going to look at how she uses it as a people review. So appraisal seemed really big and complicated and difficult to her, but she's got a really simple tool that's going to get her into almost people getting used to reviews being, and that's learning. That is where, you know, you're involving people in problem solving, you're involving people in developing and improving the business, and also it can be used as a personal development tool too. And that was great.
She used it with her employees on the processes. They didn't feel like the microscope was on them or the spotlight was on them, did they? So then when they went back to use it for themselves, they were comfortable and familiar with it because they'd been using it on farm for the way they did things on farm. So yeah. Okay, the other thing that is on the labour life cycle are there's some skills matrices, and there's some sort of places that you can actually record some of the sort of the development. So if you want to keep a track of it with your different employees, there are templates on there that you can, download, print off, use them online, save them, for yourself. So, okay, so before we head off to any questions, is there anything that we just want to get across as a final thought in this section, and then we'll go into some questions?
I've got a final thought, and it actually brings in our last case study, to be honest, that we've not mentioned, which was Alistair, the pig farmer from Suffolk.
Yeah.
And I think what was really useful, and it's a really nice summary of almost going back to development, also has to be about you too. So if you're the manager, it's about how you find time for your development and your learning. And I know that Alistair was actually really experienced at managing and developing people. But because he tapped into one of the tools on the labour life cycle, which was the communication chain, he found just a really simple visual tool that just got him to think about a different way of getting people to see that they added value within the business. And his feedback was really useful, because he sort of said, it's almost been useful for me just to sort of have something that sparks some new ideas. And just by having a visual tool that got him to, he's great at communication, but the tool he used just gave him another way of helping his team see how they really contributed to what the business was developing. So that was him, from a personal development point of view, from the manager. He was saying actually it just made him, it switched some light bulbs on for him. So it made him think. So I suppose the important thing is, don't forget about yourself. Often we talk about developing our staff, but actually sometimes it's just having that space to reflect and think and look at new ways of working.
That links quite nicely, actually. There's a question coming, Nicola, and so it says, Nicola, what was your biggest learning going through the case study, the labour life cycle process?
I think I've probably got two, actually, and I would rate them equally. The first was, I would say, looking at my team and working out with, by using the tools like the VAC questionnaire, looking at their learning styles, which is not something that I had actually really considered, that actually it's not just a case of a written instruction, which is generally how I learned, and therefore I expect that's how other people learn. And so I think that was really important for me. And that was a learning curve to think, actually, there are people out there that learn in a very different way. And that tool for me was great. And it's something that I will be able to apply time and time again going forward. But I think the other thing, and it's maybe not quite relevant to this, but it was that I always felt that as an employer, as a company, we struggled to employ, because we have a lot of big farms around us that have pieces of equipment that are more modern, that can offer probably better training, that can develop their employees, higher salaries, and that we were always in competition with them. And I think it's something that I really took from this study, that actually, we offer something a little bit different, and that we can actually be an employer of choice. And by developing our employees, by listening to them, working with them, making them feel valued, that actually is something that an employee takes forward and would like out of an employer. And maybe that is something that can help with staff retention. So investing in your employees, is really important if you're a small farmer. So if you've only got a small team, that's one way of retaining your employees, by taking time out in the day just to talk to them, being good with them, working with them, with their families if they have issues, time off, sickness, things like that. So they're not just a number on a payroll, they're an actual person within your team that's valued. So I think probably those two things together were invaluable for me, and were great.
Good, thank you. Okay, we've got another one. So if you have got questions, please do type them in. We've got another one coming in that is, I've got it there actually as well. How do you get employees on farm to develop each other when some seem reluctant to share the knowledge that they have? I suppose that's more of a sort of like a buddying system, or when somebody's shadowing somebody and you can't get somebody to share what they know. What about Kim? You've probably come across that.
I think some of this also comes from how I suppose you set up development and help people understand, what's in it for the business, it's the whiffing factor, what's in it for me and what's in it for the business, as opposed to a task. So, if you, I've seen people who've been buddied up and there's been not really enough explanation around how it's going to work, making sure that the person that is they're buddying up with knows what's expected of them and has got the skills to actually help the other person learn. So if people see it as a threat, because you won't be surprised you hear people thinking, well, what happens if they get really good and then they'll be having my job? And I know a lot more than them, and that makes me feel more important and more valuable to the farm. So often it's how it's set up, I think, that makes the difference. And it's helping people see what's in it for them. I've seen people who are quite proud when they've helped somebody else develop and grow. And that needs to be recognised as well and rewarded to a certain extent. If you've got the skills to help other people learn, then that's really valuable. And it also, a bit like what Nicola was saying about retaining staff, being a buddy and then helping somebody learn, that's a real useful skill to have. And if you've got that skill, then that's also attractive, to other employers. So set it up so people understand what's expected of them. And that threat is often taken away by almost getting them to see that people are achieving because of what they've shown them or helped them learn. And that sense of, being proud that you've passed your experience on often gets missed. Sometimes the focus is on the person that's learned, the new person that's joined, but there's not enough recognition and feedback to the person that's actually helped that happen. So take that threat away, and I think it can be really good to recognise somebody that's got those skills to be able to buddy too.
Yeah, so it's made something of, and it's they get some accolade for it. Okay. So another one, if we invest in people and they leave, what's the point?
A good one for Nicola, that one.
Yeah, that's our biggest concern, because we have struggled with staff retention. You train somebody up and they're using you as a springboard to go on to a bigger job somewhere else, and that has always been a worry. You put them through their forklift test, their teleporter test, and a year later they're going to leave. But it's something that we're working on as a company. So trying to develop, we have to put our staff through those tests. So what we need to do is look at other aspects of the business to try and encourage our employees to stay. So, making sure that they feel valued, so that, yes, we put them through the training and we hope that they stay with us long term and they won't use us as a springboard somewhere else. So it's about investing in them as an all-round employee, not just in their training, but as a person as well.
And you've had people who have gone because the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and then they've come back, haven't they, Nicola?
And then they've gone again, and now they want to come back again.
So there we are. It does work.
Just to add to that, Kay, because I know I've seen some, actually, even on farm, I've seen quite a lot of examples where sometimes what the manager does is they might actually say, we'll invest in you, but if you leave within so many months, 6 months, 12 months, then they might have to pay a percentage of what's been invested in them back. In the corporate world, the world I sort of work in, that's actually quite common.
Yeah, we have done that in the past, but or that's been in a contract, but we've not, to be fair, gone through with it. But I think, to be honest with you, employees tend to stay 2 or 3 years. It's not sort of within that that 6-month period that they're leaving. It's normally 2 to 3 years. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for all employees, particularly younger people, because younger people are the ones that want to move on to a different job, to grow their knowledge and work in different companies.
Any advice on people who are reluctant to engage in training and development?
Well, Nicola, you had one of those.
Yes, we do. Well, we still do. So it was about trying to find the best way to learn for us. So looking at the strengths of that employee and looking at the way they learnt, and then tailoring any training towards that. So accepting that, you know, computer-based courses weren't the way forward, and that would be off-putting, that would discourage them from wanting to undertake any training. So going for a course that was more visual and was with a tutor, you know, that's face-to-face, and then trying to tailor courses. So instead of sending our employee that we're talking about here on a course, actually having somebody come into the company that can just deal with that specific task with her, rather than sending her on a course that might be overwhelming. So it's about tailoring training to the employee if they're reluctant to learn. So finding out the best way of learning and tailoring it to that.
And it is a bit like the unknown, you know, I guess it's a bit of human nature, isn't it? When it's something you're not familiar with, then you can get it built up in your head as something big and scary, and it is just getting over that first barrier, and then people often say, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or yeah, okay. So, oh yeah, okay, this one. So it's frustrating when you pay for training, but and then it doesn't stick. How can you make training sticky?
I mean, the one thing I think often doesn't happen with training. So I think if you do need people to do specific training, then at least have what I'd call a top and tail conversation with them. So, you know, they might attend, you know, a day's training course, they might attend an online training course. Before they do it, just have one of those coaching conversations with them about what you want them to get out of it. So talk to them about, you know, what they're going to learn. Because I think if you give them some clues about what what you're hoping they're going to bring back, if they've talked to you about it and then they go and do the training, and then when they come back, you do a review of what they've learned. So you can coach. That's where the coaching really comes into its own. I call coaching, for me, sometimes protects your investment in training, because when people are back on farm, it's about the conversations to help them use that learning. And sometimes when you've gone off on training, when you come back on farm, it's not quite the theory that you were taught on the training course. So if you don't sort of ask them questions, or maybe give them a chance to practice and review how it's gone, sometimes that learning gets a bit lost, or it isn't quite working, or they're not confident about trying something out that they learned on a course. So I always say, you know, coaching in itself can really protect you investing in training, but that also means you've got to embed that learning. You've got to almost think about how you're going to bring that learning to life back in reality, as opposed to the course that they've done.
Okay, we've got a few more rolling in now, actually. Okay, so when developing people, how do you make it fair across employees? Some might want more development than others, and then they might resent others for getting the development. That's a good question, that is, isn't it?
It is a good question. And I think that's where, if you get to the point, crikey, it's brilliant if you get to the point where you've got almost development as a way of working on, you know, within your business. And I think what becomes important is that you communicate out how you're going to manage that. You know, maybe what you say that it's not quite policy, but what is your commitment to developing people within your business? And if your commitment is, and you're going to resource it, so you might want a budget that you're going to attach to it, then it's about identifying training needs. And I think some of those are driven by the business. So I think sometimes it's prioritising who gets what training, because it might be that what's most important to moving the business forward. And then there's personal development, which might be something that, you know, anybody can tap into. But I think you at least need people to know how you're going to approach training and development within your business. So give them almost a chance to be part of it, but then have a way of them seeing how you select people, how you prioritise people. And I think if you're open with that and you're fair with it, so that you're not putting the same person on a training course like every other week, nobody else is getting anywhere near any sort of development. If you're fair with it and you review it and give feedback to your people, then they'll understand, they'll be with you. They'll be with you, and they'll understand why people are maybe getting training and they're not. That's often what causes problems. If somebody's disappeared off a training course, you know, that another person's been waiting for 6 months and they don't know why that's happened. And it could just be that that person actually, you know, is almost a more urgent case because a new contract's come and you need them up to speed. If you don't communicate that out to people and to the business, then people see it, they'll make their own assumptions. You know, they might assume it's been done unfairly, or it's, you know, why are they getting it and I'm not?
Which comes back to the whole section on communication, which is on the labour life cycle. Right, one more, and then I think we're getting sort of a bit running out of time. So sometimes, okay, so this is about enthusiasm and people who love being trained and being developed. Sometimes we get employees who want to go on every single course going. How do you balance that out with getting the work done, but at the same time not stopping their enthusiasm? So rather than being too reluctant to go, we've got, you know, the too enthusiastic to go. But that's been covered off quite nicely by what you're talking about.
I think it has a little bit. Yeah, I think it has a little bit. Yeah, and also just to have a sort of a really simple example, I sort of worked with a client that had got actually just when people have got a real activist style of learning, they almost like want to do stuff all the time. You know, they get really giddy. I know people who just get so excited when the training budget comes out that they want to book themselves on every course that's actually on the list. The reality is they might attend every course on the list because they just like doing new stuff, but they might not learn anything from it. So you've almost got to be careful that, you know, people that are giddy and want to book on every training course, it's just that they like doing stuff. And when you look at those other options of how you can develop them, you can get them doing stuff within the business that they can still learn from. So you can really play to that style of learning if people want to have a go, you know, give them a project, give them a problem to solve, give them something to do in a meeting, but make sure that you coach and review that so they're learning. And it's not sort of waiting for a course to come up, it's just having more options available to you so that you almost can have more development opportunities if you look at just what's going on within the business. But just make sure people learn rather than just want to book on lots of training courses, because that's not learning necessarily. It's just that they might just like the excitement of doing something new.
Nicola, were you going to say something then? You went to talk and
no. I was thinking that's very true, that some people do just you know like to you know spend time doing different things and you know learning experiences and don't necessarily add value. Yeah.
I think the coaching is the little secret weapon. I think coaching is your little secret weapon, because I think that gives you the opportunity to just create learning, but you've got to help learning stick. I love the fact that we've used sticky learning tonight. You know, you've really got a chance to help learning stick. So if people have experiences or try new stuff, then your coaching means they're more likely to remember it.
Yeah, I think that's right with the coaching, you know, listening and talking to your team to find out, you know, how they want developing and making sure you're developing them in the right way. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I think we've come to the end. I think we got there. I've got another QR code there to pop up so people can get to the pages. So a massive thank you to Isaac behind the scenes, Maya behind the scenes, for helping us out with the webinar, and obviously Kim and Nicola, complete stars. Thank you very much, and especially Nicola, thank you for letting us come to your farm and for engaging with the case study. Couldn't have done it without you. And there's a video coming out of Nicola as well, so yeah, watch this space. She's been a complete star. She's done a podcast for us and the webinar. We're really, really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Thanks.
So yeah, if you have any questions that you'd still like to pass through, we can come back to you. My email's up on the screen at the moment. The website information is there as well. This is the 4th in a series of 5 webinars. We've got the last one coming up next Wednesday night about progressing people. And that's going to be with farmer Mike King at Kingspool Holsteins and Natalie Ward of Thring Solicitors. So it just leaves me to say, really, whatever stage you are at in growing your people, please look at what we've got on offer at AHDB for you. And thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.